Okay. Yes. Great. All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Finance Committee of the City Council, City of Lancaster, for Tuesday, October 12th. It is 5:36. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This evening, we just have one item, and it is the presentation for the 2020 audit report. And we are joined by members of our accounting team, our director, and Mr. Patrick Hopkins, and Jen. I never remember your last name, Jen.
So she's going to do her presentation. As I said in the email that I sent you all, this is like a high level. If you need to have her dig into weeds on anything, she said to me earlier she's more than happy to do that, but the presentation itself is high level, and kick it off.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. Is this turned on? Can you hear me? Looks like the red light. Oh,
Yeah,
there we go.
you're on.
Just had to get closer. Good evening, everyone. So the first couple slides are our required communications that we are required to have, and we do that with the board and the mayor. This is also included in a written letter as well. So first is to communicate our responsibilities as your auditors in accordance with the generally accepted auditing standards, as well as the government auditing standards in the uniform guidance. Similar to the prior year, we also perform the regular standard audit as well as an audit in accordance with the government auditing standards and the uniform guidance, because every year you have more than $750,000 of federal expenditures. So what that means is we choose major programs to do additional compliance work because you're over that threshold. So our responsibilities as your auditors is in expressing your opinion on the financial statements that they are materially correct in accordance with the generally accepted accounting principles. That's what we call GAAP. And we also, because of the government auditing standards in uniform guidance, we also gain an understanding of your internal controls, your compliance on financial statements, as well as compliance with those federal awards. But we do not opine on the effectiveness of your internal control. That's not the purpose of our audit. But if we come across items, we do report that to council as well. And included in the audit, similar to the prior year, because they meet the criteria for being included as what's called a discreetly presented component unit in accordance with the Government Auditing Standards Board, which is GASB. I know I'm throwing a lot of acronyms at you. But including the financial statements are 7 other entities that meet that criteria, which Patrick evaluates every year to make sure that they should be included. And out of the 7 of those, we only audit 1 of those, which is the Lancaster Parking Authority. So we do rely on the reports of those other external auditors and pull that information into the report. And because we have to report the cities in accordance with the government auditing standards, in the opinion requirements that you have, external sources do not require them to have that. So we do report that those 4 entities listed on that slide are not in accordance with either government audit standards or uniform guidance. So the required communication, significant accounting policies, there were no changes from prior year to current year. The transactions that were recorded in your financial statements were reported in the proper period. There were no issues with a lack of authoritative guidance, so everything was recorded properly within the financial statements. There are significant accounting estimates similar to the prior year that management evaluates every year, and that's how the transactions are recorded. They're listed on that slide. And these, we just have to let the users of the financial statements know that they are significant accounting estimates. So one of the examples is actuarial assumptions of your pension and other post-employment benefit liabilities. That is actuarially determined. You hire an actuarialist, they provide reports to you, and it's based upon estimates at one point in time, one snapshot as of 12/31 with those actuarial assumptions, and that drives those liabilities. So it's a very significant estimate. And there's lots of financial statement disclosures included in that which show you all those assumptions. And of course, fair value of investments. The most significant disclosure affecting the financial statements is there are some funds that have negative unrestricted net position, particularly in some of your proprietary funds, and that disclosure is included in note 21 of the financial statements. And we had no difficulties encountered with management and performing our audit. I would like to point out this is the second year that we performed our audit fully remote very successfully. So we thank management for all their hard work to get us the information that we need. There was one uncorrected misstatement that's immaterial to the financial statements, and we passed on that adjustment. That's included in this letter. And there were material entries that we proposed, and they were corrected by management. I'll cover that on another slide. We had no disagreements with management in the course of our audit that we have to report to you. There was a signed management representation letter that management, in order to release the financial statements, these are representations that management makes, very similar to the prior year. We're not aware of any consultation with other accounting firms where it would arise to try and obtain a second opinion. There were no issues discussed prior to retention that were outside of the basic relationship and the scope of our audit service. Financial statements will require supplementary information. There's management discussion and analysis included in the beginning of the financial statements. There's also historical information for your pension as well as your other post-employment benefit plans. We do limited procedures over that information, but we do not opine on it, very similar to the prior year, so that is included in the audit opinion. And those are required in accordance with GASB. There's also supplementary information in relation to the audit opinion. So there's a couple schedules for sewer costs. We do review that information, do audit procedures over it, and in relation to the audit opinion, we deem it to be fairly presented. And there's one schedule that is included in supplementary information. It's the last page of the financial statements. It is unaudited and is explained on the statement itself. So with all that said and done, the results of the audit, you have what's called an unmodified opinion. It's the best opinion that the city can receive. It's also the same type of opinion that was given in the prior year financial statements. And in the one paragraph of that audit opinion, we state that the financial statements of the city were fairly presented in accordance with the generally accepted accounting principles and were materially presented. We did not audit those 6 individual component units. We rely on other auditors. The required supplementary information that I explained is unaudited. And the supplementary information, I explained that as well. And there's also a paragraph talking about the 4 component units that are not performed in accordance with the government auditing standards. And included on here, there are several series of slides that have historical information. 2020 and going back past 4 years, so a total of 5 years. The first section is focused on your governmental activities. So government financial statements, if you haven't reviewed previous year financial statements, they're a little different than other entity financial statements because governments just function differently. And the Government Accounting Standards Board is what we have to abide by. That's what the city has to present their financial statements in. So your governmental activities is economic focus, so it's on what we call the full accrual. So it takes all of your governmental funds, including your general fund, and it includes any long-term receivables, any long-term payables. So this is where you would see your bonds and your net pension liabilities, your OPEB liabilities, and likewise any receivables. So the focus is a little different than how you think on your general fund and how you budget. You change in net position, which is your net loss for your total governmental activities, was $4.4 million. And just some quick financial highlights. And I also recommend to review the management discussion analysis that's written in the beginning of the financial statements because it gives a very good high-level snapshot on how significant fluctuations from prior year to current year. For the governmental activities, what's driving, let me see here. So your total expenses were about $75 million, and there was an increase because of that OPEB expense, that liability. That's that one-snapshot liability that's actuarially determined. So that drives that large change in your expenses, which contributed to your net loss during the year. And here's some historical graphical analysis on the revenues and the expenses. This is also taken from your statement of activities, and that's within your financial statements. If you have the PDF of the financial statements in front of you, it's PDF page 25. But the statement of activities presents your expenses and your program revenues by department. So it's helpful for a financial statement user to see by department the expenses that are incurred and what revenue is directly offsetting those expenses. For instance, public safety, as any other city or any other municipality, it's where your majority of your expenses are. But if you think about the revenue that comes in, it doesn't offset the total expenses. So then down below in your statement of activities is what's called your general revenues. So your taxes and other sources are subsidizing those costs. And this is a snapshot of your governmental activities net position. So governmental activities equity. And in accordance with the GASB, you have to report it by 3 categories: unrestricted, restricted, and net investment in capital assets. And as of 12/31/20, your total net position is the negative $142 million approximately. But what's driving that large net liability, that large net loss, is your OPEB liabilities, and that is disclosed in the management's discussion analysis. And you can see that in the large negative unrestricted. And the total percentage is 29% of your total net position at the end of the year is net investment in capital assets. 4% is restricted from external sources. The remaining negative 133 is unrestricted.
And Jen, just to piggyback on that last comment about, so the OPEB liability, there was a change in the GASB rules between 2017 and 2018. That's why there's that big difference. Just point of reference, because those are large negative numbers.
Yes.
So,
But not uncommon with other third-class cities. And there are note 11, if you want to see the details of your net pension liability, and note 12 is your other post-employment benefit disclosures, if you want to see more detail regarding that. Focus on the business type activities, another historical analysis showing your change in net position, revenues, and expenses. So your business type activities are your utility funds: sewer, water, trash, and stormwater. And your total, there was a net income of about $867,000 during the year. There were charges for services increased. There was an increase in some sewer rates and changes in your expenses as well. Those are significant. This shows it. So the way this is categorized is 2020 expenses look higher, but that's only because the transfer out is included in there. But a better analysis of that would be included in that management discussion analysis of what expenses were reduced during the year as a result of the pandemic. And a chart showing your revenues and the expenses for your business type activities. And once again, this is all broken out within the financial statements in your management discussion analysis. This chart is a net position breakout for the past 5 years of your total business type activities. Unrestricted, restricted would be restricted from external sources, and your net investment in capital assets. So total net position for your business type activities is $68.5 million as of 12/31/20, and 132% of that is included in that net investment in capital assets category, and 6% is restricted from external sources. Now the focus on your general fund, this is some financial highlights, just focus on your general fund, which is your chief operating fund. So this is how the city budgets. This does not include your long-term debt liabilities or your OPEB or your net pension. You did have a net loss of approximately $393,000 during the year. However, the city budgeted for a rather larger deficit, so there was a large reduction in your expenses during the year as a result of the pandemic. You can read more detail and include your management discussion analysis, and your revenue, receiving that CARES funding to help offset some of those lost revenues coming in. And there is also a budgetary analysis included in the required supplementary information, and your management discussion analysis does highlight the differences between your budget and your actual if you want to see more detail. For your general fund balance, the categories are a little different compared to the other slides that we saw. So there's a non-spendable, which is a very small portion. It's just your prepaid expenditures. Your assigned is internally assigned. You have it assigned for the future, the next year's, the budget, workers' comp, and other, your fire station construction project and debt service. And that breakout you can see on the face of the financial statements. And then your unassigned category is what is available for spending. And that approximated 12% as of 12/31/20. And your total general fund balance was $15 million as of 12/31/20. and a graphical analysis of just your general fund revenues and the expenses. This does not include your other financing sources and uses, so it doesn't include your transfers in or interfund reimbursements. And this slide shows your governmental funds revenue mix. So the governmental funds includes general fund and all of your grant funds, your debt service fund, as well as your capital projects. You can see by far taxes is the largest source of your revenues, followed by intergovernmental revenues. The city always does a great job by getting external grants from either the state or federal governments to help subsidize those capital-related costs. And this graph is a expenditure mix for all of your governmental funds, so your general fund, as well as your special revenue funds and debt service fund. Your public safety expenditures, of course, is the largest drive of your total expenses. Just wanted to point out that debt service that you see there is a little spike in 2019. That was only because of the current refundings that took place. So that's the only reason that that cost looks a little higher in that year. And as I mentioned, we also performed the single audit, and that's on the compliance and internal control side. So I mentioned that if we come across any deficiencies that might arise to either a material weakness or a significant deficiency, we are required to report that in the single audit report. And the one finding that we did give was we did propose material adjustments for other post-employment benefits and some of your proprietary funds, as well as some adjustments that needed made to correct receivable balances in the general fund. These were reviewed and approved by management, but just because the dollar amount, that's why we had to include that in there. And management already put together a corrective action plan, which was included in the report and has steps to correct those. And for the federal program, so this is the single audit, we chose your lead-based hazard control program as well as the CARES funding that you got from the county. And those were tested as major federal programs in 2020. And we do the federal government or the grant agreements, we use that as our audit programs. So we designed tests of internal control and compliance, and we had no findings to report. So you've received an unmodified opinion. It's the best opinion you can receive on those two major programs. And we also provide what's called a management letter, and this is just best practice recommendations, so these do not arise to the level of findings. The one we just recommend for reimbursements, it's a repeat finding for the past several years. It's just how the reimbursements between the funds are recorded. And the other one was regarding one of the particular HUD forms that have required it was a few days late, so we just recommended that that's internally tracked to make sure that the deadline is met. And there's upcoming Government Accounting Standards Board standards because they're always busy, and we like to make management aware of them. The biggest one will be leases. That doesn't impact you until 2022. We can work with management on how that's recorded. And did anybody have any questions over anything I covered or audit in general?
Thank you. Anyone on the committee or council or mayor, if you have anything to add? I don't have anything additional. Appreciate your work on this and doing it remotely for the second year in a row. I'm sure it was not easy, but maybe a little easier this time around. And appreciate the work that everybody on city staff does to continue to allow us to have an unmodified opinion and a good audit. So thank you. Anything else to add, Patrick?
No, just I wanted to sort of echo your thanks really for Vaughn and her team. Vaughn started here in August of last year, immediately was launched into budget. And then as soon as that was done and her head was spinning around, then we launched on the audit. So she's now been through a full cycle. Her team and her have been through a full cycle together now. And we were joking when Jen got here earlier that the 2020 audit is done, and in a couple of weeks we'll get a notification from Jen that when they want to schedule their audit work for the 2021 audit. So this is a never-ending cycle, we've said it year in and year out when we've had these clean audits that it's not just sort of a stamp of approval on the processes and everything that we have in place, but it also especially on the grant side of things, is a huge benefit because grantors want to know that their dollars are spent well.
Yep.
Whether that's the federal government through CDBG and ESG programs or, state and local grants that we get. So, just want to echo my thanks for Yvonne and her team's work, and for Mayor Dussel, which has been great to work with. It actually is easier, I think, for us to have them not in the building, frankly, because not because we have anything against auditors, but because we have some serious space issues in this building, and they have a team of auditors that does this work. It's not just Jen, it's a whole other team. So, happy to have another successful year, and look forward to having them back remotely next year again.
Yeah. It starts all over again. I can certainly appreciate that, having done audits myself. So thank you very much. If no one else has anything further, then I will close this meeting of the Finance Committee. And I guess I'll take a motion to adjourn. I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
are adjourned
Thank you.
until soon.